The rain fell in sheets across the cracked asphalt behind Jefferson Elementary, where a once magnificent German shepherd lay motionless, his ribs visible beneath matted fur. Sergeant Sarge, to his handlers, had made his decision. After 3 years of alleyways and garbage cans, of civilians who recoiled from his scarred face, of searching for a purpose that no longer existed, he was done fighting. His cloudy eyes fixed on nothing as memories flickered the weight of medals being pinned to his tactical vest, the heat of Afghanistan, the handlers who had loved him, then the cold bureaucracy that had discarded him when his unit disbanded. 8 years of service, 3 tours of duty. Countless lives saved, yet here he lay, a ghost of America's forgotten wars. This is a dignified end, he seemed to think as his eyes slowly closed. Then came a small voice, cutting through his surrender. "Hey there, doggy, are you hungry? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story." Ridgewood. North Carolina existed in the shadow of Fort Bragg, a town where military convoys were as common as school buses, and where the sound of distant artillery practice barely warranted a glance skyward. The streets were lined with American flags that had faded in the Carolina sun, and the local diners' walls displayed photos of hometown heroes who had served across generations. It was here, amid the patriotic fervor of a military community, that Sargent had wandered for the past 3 years. Once the pride of his unit, the German shepherd had deteriorated into what locals simply called that stray. His powerful frame, once 90 pounds of disciplined muscle, had withered to perhaps 60. The glossy black and tan coat that handlers had brushed to regulation perfection now hung dull and patchy, with gray spreading from his muzzle up to his once alert ears. Only the worn metal tag still dangling from his frayed collar hinted at his distinguished past. The voice that had interrupted Sargent's surrender belonged to Lily Thompson, a small 8-year-old with unruly blonde hair pulled into mismatched pigtails. New to Jefferson Elementary. Lily carried herself with the cautious posture of a child who had learned to navigate adults' shifting moods. 3 months earlier, she had watched her parents' marriage crumble, culminating in a hasty move from Cincinnati to this military town where her father had once been stationed. Thomas "Tom" Thompson had not returned from Afghanistan, the same man who had left, missing his lower left leg and carrying shrapnel in his back. The former Army Ranger now walked with a prosthetic and a barely concealed grimace. At 38, he channeled his frustration into his work as a physical therapist at the VA hospital, helping other broken soldiers rebuild their lives while struggling to piece together his own. Sarah Thompson had followed her ex-husband to Ridgewood for Lily's sake, taking a teaching position at the very elementary school her daughter attended. At 36, stress had etched premature lines around her eyes as she balanced single motherhood, a new career, and constant worry about Lily's asthma, which seemed to flare with every emotional upheaval. Watching over Jefferson Elementary was Mr. Jenkins, the security guard whose Vietnam-era crew cut had long since turned white. His weathered face mapped campaigns long forgotten by the nation, but eternally present in his dreams. When he first spotted Sargent lingering near the school's perimeter, something in the dog's bearing had sparked recognition in the old veteran's eyes. Lily first noticed Sargent on a Tuesday, her 3rd week at Jefferson Elementary, while other children chased each other across the playground. She sat alone on a bench at the edge of the schoolyard, unwrapping the sandwich her mother had carefully cut into triangles that morning. A movement at the chain-link fence caught her attention, the German shepherd watching the children with an intensity that didn't seem threatening, but vigilant. "You're not supposed to feed strays," Madison Campbell announced, appearing suddenly beside Lily's bench. "My mom says they might have rabies." The girl tossed her perfectly braided hair and sauntered back to her friends, leaving Lily alone again. But Lily had already made her decision. Checking that the playground monitors weren't watching, she slipped the turkey from between her bread slices and walked casually toward the fence. The dog didn't move, didn't bark, just watched her with eyes that seemed to hold more understanding than most adults she knew. "It's okay," she whispered, placing the meat on the ground and backing away. "I'm not going to hurt you." The German shepherd didn't approach until Lily had retreated 10 paces. Even then, his movements were measured, deliberate. He took the offering with surprising gentleness, then backed away himself, maintaining the same distance between them. "You're welcome," Lily said, feeling a smile form for what felt like the first time since moving to Ridgewood. The next day, Lily packed extra food in her lunchbox, ignoring her mother's raised eyebrow at the unusual request for a second sandwich. The German shepherd was waiting in the same spot, sitting with military stillness. This time, she noticed the glint of metal around his neck. "Hold up there, young lady," came a gruff voice as Lily approached the fence on the third day. Mr. Jenkins, the school security guard, stood with arms crossed over his faded security uniform. "That dog's been hanging around for days. Could be dangerous." Lily clutched her sandwich, eyes downcast. "He's not dangerous, Mr. Jenkins. He's just hungry." The old man's stern expression softened slightly as he studied the German shepherd. The way he sits. Notice that posture. That's no ordinary stray." He knelt with a grunt, his knee joints protesting. "Watch this." He raised his hand in a specific gesture. The German shepherd immediately straightened, alert. "Well, I'll be—" Mr. Jenkins murmured. "Military working dog. If I ever saw one. Wonder what his story is." He stood slowly. "Still. Don't get too attached. Animal control sweeps this area every month or so." That afternoon, Lily lingered after the final bell, watching as rain clouds gathered on the horizon. The weather report her mother had checked that morning warned of heavy storms throughout the weekend. The thought of the dignified dog weathering 3 days of downpour made her stomach twist. "He'll be okay," she tried to convince herself, even as thunder rumbled in the distance. Friday morning brought announcement of the monthly safety assembly. Principal Watkins' voice crackled over the intercom, listing upcoming events. "And remember, children, the county animal control will be conducting their neighborhood sweep next Tuesday. If you see stray animals around the school, do not approach them." Lily's heart sank. She pictured men with nets and poles, Sergeant locked in a cage. And then, she'd heard enough from Madison about what happened to strays nobody claimed. During recess, she found Mr. Jenkins watching the playground from beneath the oak tree. "Mr. Jenkins, what happens to the dogs animal control takes?" The old guard sighed. "They try to find homes, but there's too many strays around here. Military town like this, people deploy, can't take their pets. Some just leave them behind. But what if the dog was a military dog, like a hero? Mr. Jenkins studied her carefully. Even heroes get forgotten sometimes. Miss Lily, especially the four-legged kind. That evening, Sarah Thompson was working late grading papers, and Tom had physical therapy at the VA. The house would be empty for at least 2 hours after Lily got home from the bus stop. Rain had started falling as Lily stepped off the school bus, clutching her backpack to her chest. The German Shepherd was huddled beneath the scraggly pine tree at the corner of Maple and Elm, halfway between the bus stop and Lily's house. For the first time, he looked directly at her as she approached, his eyes reflecting a fatigue that seemed to go beyond physical exhaustion. Lily made her decision. "Come on," she whispered, pulling a piece of hot dog from her pocket, her emergency asthma snack, saved from lunch. "You can come with me, just for tonight, for—" She held out the food, then backed away 2 steps. The German Shepherd rose stiffly, limping slightly on his right foreleg. He took the offering, then waited, watching her. "This way," Lily said, taking another few steps toward home, then waiting, slowly, cautiously. The German Shepherd followed. Getting Sargent into the house proved easier than Lily had anticipated. The back gate's latch, perpetually loose since they'd moved in, yielded to her practiced touch. The German Shepherd followed her with cautious dignity across the modest backyard, pausing only once when Mrs. Peterson's cat hissed from atop the fence. He didn't bark or lunge, just watched with professional assessment before continuing his limping progress toward the kitchen door. "Good boy," Lily whispered as she fumbled with her house key. "Very quiet. That's perfect." Inside, the house was silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift to her parents that Sarah had claimed in the divorce to maintain some sense of continuity for Lily. The kitchen smelled faintly of that morning's oatmeal and the coffee her mother perpetually forgot to finish before rushing out the door. Sargent hesitated at the threshold, as though crossing it violated some long-established protocol. Lily felt her heart sink. Would he refuse to come inside? But then the skies opened, rain hammering against the roof, and the German Shepherd made his decision. With careful steps, he entered the Thompson home. "This way," Lily whispered, leading him through the kitchen, past the living room with its half-unpacked moving boxes, and down the hallway to her bedroom. Her fingers trailed along the wall, counting the framed photos. Mom, Dad. Lily at the Cincinnati Zoo. Mom, Dad. Lily at Grandma's farm. Mom, Dad still with 2 legs. Lily as a toddler. The progression of a family that no longer existed in its photographed form. Her bedroom was the one fully settled room in the house, a deliberate effort by both parents to provide stability. Lavender walls, white furniture, and a bookshelf overflowing with stories of brave girls and magical worlds. Sargent paused again at this doorway, sniffing cautiously. "It's okay. This is my room," Lily explained, as though the dog understood every word. And somehow, he seemed to... The bath that followed was an exercise in patience and trust. Lily filled her plastic waste bin with warm water and, using her own strawberry-scented shampoo, began the delicate process of washing years of street grime from Sargent's coat. He stood motionless in the center of her bathroom, eyes fixed forward, occasionally trembling when she touched certain areas' old injuries. She realized, apologizing each time. As dirt swirled away down the drain, Sargent's true colors emerged, the rich black saddle marking across his back, the tan points on his chest and legs, the distinctive facial markings of a well-bred German shepherd. And something else, the scars, a ragged line across his right flank, a patch of fur that grew white and sparse near his shoulder, the notch missing from his left ear. It was while drying him with her beach towel that Lily discovered the tags. Beneath the grime, the metal had maintained some of its shine. She leaned close, reading aloud, Sargent, MWD, U.S. Army, 32987-1142. Sargent's head lifted slightly at the sound of his name, eyes suddenly alert, focused. Sargent, Lily repeated. Is that your name? Are you Sargent? The German shepherd exhaled deeply, his posture shifting subtly, as though someone had finally called him by a name long forgotten. For Sargent, the familiar sensations of being groomed triggered a cascade of memories. The firm hands of Staff Sergeant Mason Rivera working shampoo through his coat before inspection. The pride in Mason's voice when commanders praised Sargent's immaculate appearance. The quiet nights in forward operating bases. Mason brushing him methodically while talking about his family back home in Oregon. My daughter would love you, Sarge, Mason would say. When we get home, you'll meet her. She's just a little thing, but smart as a whip, smart as... But they never made it home together. The IED that took Mason had spared Sargent, leaving him to be reassigned, retrained, redeployed with a new handler who never quite connected with him the same way, then another, then the injury that ended his career, then the paperwork shuffle that left him ownerless when his unit disbanded. Lily's gentle hands brought him back to the present. She had spread her favorite quilt on the floor beside her bed, creating a makeshift dog bed. You need to stay super quiet, Sargent, she instructed solemnly. If my parents find out, they'll make you leave for sure. The following morning at school, Lily felt a mixture of anxiety and elation. She'd successfully snuck food to Sargent before leaving, left water in her plastic beach bucket, and extracted a solemn promise from him to be very, very quiet while she was gone. The fact that he'd seemed to understand, settling onto the quilt with a deep sigh, only confirmed her belief that this was no ordinary dog. Miss Thompson, Lily jumped, nearly dropping her lunch tray. Mr. Jenkins stood beside her table, his weathered face unreadable. Yes, Mr. Jenkins. That stray dog isn't around the fence today. His eyes narrowed slightly. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Lily felt heat rush to her face. She was a terrible liar. Her mother always said her eyes gave everything away. Maybe he found somewhere else to go. Mr. Jenkins glanced around the cafeteria, then lowered himself into the small chair opposite Lily with a grunt. Listen here, he said, voice pitched low. I saw you yesterday, heading home with that dog following you. Lily's heart plummeted. This was it, Sargent would be reported. Animal control called. Everything ruined. I won't tell, Mr. Jenkins continued, surprising her. But that's a military working dog, or I'll eat my hat. Those tags, did you get a look at them? Lily nodded cautiously. It says Sergeant, and some numbers. The old guard nodded, a flash of something like respect crossing his features. Military working dog. That's what MWD stands for. That dog was a soldier, Miss Lily. Probably saw more combat than most of the folks in this town. How do you know so much about military dogs, Mr. Jenkins? A distant look crossed his face. Had a scout dog in Nam, shepherd mix named Duke. Best partner I ever had. He cleared his throat. Point is, those dogs serve their country. They don't deserve to end up strays or in some pound. He's at my house, Lily confessed in a whisper. But my parents don't know yet. My dad, he doesn't like dogs. Mr. Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. Keep him safe for now. I'll see what I can find out. He stood with another grunt. And Lily dogs like that. They understand more than you think. They just need someone to believe in them again. That evening, Lily rushed home from the bus stop, terrified she might find her mother had discovered Sargent. Instead, she found him exactly where she'd left him, lying on the quilt, though the stuffed bear she'd placed beside him now rested between his paws. I brought you something, she whispered, pulling a proper dog bowl from her backpack purchased with her saved allowance during lunch break from the dollar store near school. Sargent watched her with attentive eyes as she filled the bowl with water and placed it beside him. Then, to her astonishment, he rose, approached her, and gently rested his head against her lap. You're home now, Lily promised, stroking his graying muzzle. I'll never leave you, Sargent. Never, ever. And though it was surely a trick of the light, Lily would later swear that she saw tears in the old warrior's eyes as he finally allowed himself to trust again. Life with a secret German shepherd required a level of strategic planning that would have impressed Lily's military father had he known about it. Each morning, she woke an hour before her alarm, sneaking Sargent into the backyard for a brief, carefully supervised bathroom break while the neighborhood still slept. She'd developed a system of lookouts checking for Mr. Peterson, who walked to his car at precisely 6:15 each morning, and Mrs. Abernathy, whose kitchen window overlooked a corner of the Thompsons' yard as she prepared her morning tea. Coast clear, Lily would whisper, holding the back door open for Sargent's dignified return. Back in her bedroom, she'd feed him a portion of the dog food Mr. Jenkins had discreetly provided, stored in a plastic container beneath her bed before getting herself ready for school. Stay quiet, stay hidden, she instructed each morning, pointing to the space between her bed and wall where Sargent had taken to lying during the day. The German shepherd would settle there with an almost human comprehension, his eyes following her movements as she gathered her backpack and lunch. 2 weeks into this arrangement, Lily noticed significant changes in Sargent. His coat had regained some luster, the painful thinness of his frame gradually filling out. The persistent limp in his right foreleg had improved, though it returned when he was tired. Most remarkably, his eyes had changed, the dull resignation replaced by alert awareness, tracking her movements with increasing engagement. He's looking better, Mr. Jenkins commented during their now regular lunchtime conversations. The security guard had become Lily's confidant and co-conspirator, providing not only proper dog food but also advice gleaned from his Vietnam-era canine handling experience. He still gets scared sometimes, Lily confided, picking at her cafeteria mac and cheese. Last night, a car backfired and he hid under my bed for an hour. I couldn't get him to come out. Mr. Jenkins nodded knowingly. Combat stress. Dogs get it just like people do. The military calls it canine PTSD now, all official-like. Back in my day, We just said they were shell-shocked. Like my dad, Lily said quietly. Sometimes he gets really jumpy or really quiet. Mom says it's because of what happened in Afghanistan. Your dad served with dog teams. Lily shrugged. He doesn't talk about it. He just says dogs don't belong in houses. At home, Tom Thompson had indeed noticed changes in his daughter's behavior. Sarah had mentioned it during their weekly co-parenting phone call, her voice tinged with the carefully neutral tone they now used with each other. She's been eating more than usual, Sarah noted, and she seems secretive lately, keeps her bedroom door closed all the time. She's adjusting, Tom responded, massaging his aching limb attachment point, a habit during these calls. Moving homes, parents splitting up. It's a lot. She asked me for extra sandwich meat 3 days in a row. Growing kid. Tom, be serious. And she's been doing her own laundry suddenly. Since when does an 8-year-old insist on washing her own sheets? That evening, Tom found himself pausing outside Lily's bedroom door, hand raised to knock. From inside came the sound of Lily's voice, speaking softly as though reading aloud. Nothing unusual about that. She often read to her stuffed animals, but something in the cadence made him hesitate. See, Sergeant, this is what school was like when my grandpa was little. No computers, no phones. Tom frowned. Sergeant, a new imaginary friend, he'd had concerns about Lily's social adjustment, especially after Sarah mentioned she typically sat alone at lunch. Imaginary friends at 8 might be crossing into concerning territory. His knuckles rapped against the door, perhaps more sharply than intended. "Just a minute," Lily called, her voice pitched higher than normal. He heard hurried movement, a thump. Then the door opened just enough for his daughter's face to appear. "Hi, Daddy." "Hey." Lily Pad. He used his old nickname for her, noting how her eyes darted past him toward the empty hallway. "What you doing in here?" "Reading. For school. Mind if I come in?" Another darting glance behind her. "It's kind of messy. Since when has that bothered me?" Tom pushed the door gently, and after a moment's resistance, Lily stepped back. The room appeared normal bed made with military precision, a habit she'd picked up from him. Books stacked on her nightstand, the history textbook open on her desk. But something tickled Tom's senses, the heightened awareness that had kept him alive in combat. A smell, perhaps. He inhaled subtly. Something animal, yet not unpleasant. "Dad, do you think animals understand when people talk to them?" Lily asked suddenly, drawing his attention. Tom considered the question, lowering himself to sit on her bed. "Depends on the animal. I guess some are smarter than others. Like military dogs, they have to be super smart, right?" An involuntary tension gripped Tom's shoulders. "Who's been talking to you about military dogs?" "We learned about them in school," Lily said, too quickly. "They help soldiers and save lives and stuff." Tom felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the precursor to memories he'd rather keep buried. They're working animals. Lily, tools, really, not pets. But they're heroes, too. Right? Like the soldiers? It's complicated. Tom stood abruptly, his prosthetic catching on the rug. Dogs are just... they do what they're trained to do. Sometimes that training fails. His voice had hardened, and he saw Lily withdraw slightly. He made an effort to soften his expression. "Dinner in 30 minutes. Okay, Mom's working late tonight." After he left, Lily waited until his footsteps receded down the hallway before kneeling beside her bed. "You can come out now, Sergeant." The German shepherd emerged cautiously from beneath the bed, dust bunnies clinging to his fur. His eyes held a strange expression, alert but troubled, as though Tom's voice had triggered something in him. "It's okay," Lily whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck. "He just doesn't understand yet." For Sergeant, the scent of Tom Thompson had unlocked a cascade of memories. The particular combination of military-issue soap, weapon oil, and the distinctive medications used for pain management in wounded veterans created an olfactory signature that triggered recognition. He had encountered this human before, in another life, another place. The recollection hung tantalizingly out of reach, like a scent carried on a shifting breeze. Meanwhile, Sarah Thompson found herself picking dog hairs from Lily's jacket while sorting laundry. Black and tan hairs, coarse and distinctive. Her first thought was that Lily had been playing with a friend's dog, but then she realized Lily hadn't mentioned making any friends yet, let alone visiting their homes. Probably from the school, she reasoned aloud. Maybe they had a therapy dog visit or something. She made a mental note to ask Lily about it, then promptly forgot as her phone buzzed with a text from the principal about tomorrow's faculty meeting. The following week, Lily had her first asthma attack since moving to Ridgewood. It happened during PE, a mild episode triggered by running the mandatory laps in the unseasonably warm fall air. The school nurse called Sarah, who left her classroom mid-lesson to bring Lily's inhaler. "I'm fine, Mom," Lily insisted as Sarah hovered anxiously in the nurse's office. "Really, it wasn't that bad." "We need to be careful," Sarah replied, brushing hair from Lily's forehead. "Dr. Madison said stress can make your asthma worse, and with everything that's happened—" "I'm not stressed," Lily protested. "I'm actually really happy lately." Sarah studied her daughter's face, noting the sincerity there. It was true despite the divorce, the move, the new school. Lily had seemed surprisingly content these past few weeks, less anxious, sleeping better. There had been no nightmares, no middle-of-the-night calls for comfort. "That's good, sweetie. I'm glad." What Sarah didn't know was that Lily's nightmares had indeed returned, but now, when she woke gasping in the darkness, she found Sargent already alert, his head resting on her mattress, eyes fixed on her face. His solid presence and watchful gaze provided more comfort than any parental reassurance. On the worst nights, he would carefully climb onto the foot of her bed, his weight anchoring her to reality until sleep returned. Mr. Jenkins had become an invaluable ally in Lily's secret mission. Beyond providing dog food, he'd given her a worn copy of U.S. Military Working Dog Training Handbook. Its pages dog-eared and annotated in cramped handwriting. "Found this in a box in my garage," he'd told her, though the meticulous highlighting and notes suggested otherwise. "Thought you might find it useful." From its pages, Lily learned the basic hand signals that military handlers used commands for sit, stay, come, down, to her delight. Sargent responded instantly to these signals, his training evidently intact despite years of neglect. "He remembers everything," she reported to Mr. Jenkins. "I did the hand signal for search, and he started sniffing all around my room, checking everything." The old security guard nodded thoughtfully. "That's what he was trained for. Probably an explosives detection dog. Given his age and when he would have served, those dogs save lives. "Miss Lily, they find the bombs before our boys step on 'em." This information transformed Lily's understanding of her canine companion. She began researching military working dogs during her library periods, carefully angling her computer screen away from classmates while reading articles about dog teams in Afghanistan. One evening, as rain drummed against the roof, Lily sat cross-legged on her floor beside Sargent, the handbook open before them. "You were a hero," she whispered, stroking his graying muzzle. "You saved people." Sargent's eyes held hers with an intensity that sometimes startled her, as though he understood not just the words, but the emotions behind them. A particularly loud thunderclap shook the house, and Sargent's demeanor transformed instantly. His body went rigid, ears flattened against his head. A low, rumbling growl emerged from his throat as he backed into the corner of the room. "Sargent, it's okay," Lily whispered urgently, panic rising. If her parents heard him. But the German shepherd was no longer present in the room with her. His eyes had taken on a distant, wild quality, seeing threats invisible to Lily. Another thunderclap, and he pressed himself harder against the wall, the growl deepening. In desperation, Lily tried the hand signal for "down" from the handbook. When that failed, she remembered something Mr. Jenkins had mentioned about pressure points. Cautiously, she moved to Sargent's side and pressed her small body against his, wrapping her arms as far around his substantial frame as they would reach. "You're safe," she repeated, over and over. "You're home now. You're safe." Gradually, the tension in Sargent's body eased, his breathing slowed, and awareness returned to his eyes. He turned his head slightly, licking Lily's hand once in apology, she felt, for his momentary lapse. "Lily," Sarah's voice called from the hallway. "Are you okay in there? I thought I heard something." "Just the thunder, Mom," Lily called back, heart pounding. "It scared me a little." "Do you want me to come in?" "No, I mean, I'm fine now, really." After a pause, Sarah replied, "All right, let me know if you need anything." Lily exhaled shakily, burying her face in Sargent's fur. "That was close," she whispered. In the third week of their covert arrangement, Lily noticed signs posted around the neighborhood as she walked home from the bus stop. Bold black letters proclaimed "Missing Dog" above a grainy photo of what appeared to be a German shepherd. Her heart froze as she approached one of the signs, studying the image. The dog in the photo was indeed a German shepherd, but younger, with different markings than Sargent. The relief that flooded through her was immediately followed by guilt. Someone else was missing their dog, searching with the same desperation she would feel if Sargent disappeared. That evening, she created a detailed chart of her parents' schedules, using colored markers to indicate when the house would be empty or when she needed to be especially vigilant. She taped it to the inside of her closet door, a strategic plan worthy of any military operation. What she didn't account for was her father's observational skills. Tom noticed everything a survival trait from his combat days. He noticed how Lily saved portions of her dinner in napkins when she thought no one was looking. He noticed the extra water usage on their utility bill. He noticed the distinct path wearing into the grass between the back door and the far corner of the yard. Most of all, he noticed Lily's happiness, a quiet contentment that seemed at odds with the upheaval of their family situation. His daughter had always been sensitive, easily wounded by life's inconsistencies. This new resilience puzzled him. "I think she's adjusting better than we expected," he told Sarah during their Sunday evening phone call. "Maybe the move was good for her." Sarah made a non-committal sound. "She's still secretive, keeps her door closed, does her own laundry. Have you checked her room?" "For what drugs weapons?" "She's 8. Sarah, for signs that something's wrong." "Tom, that's what parents do." After hanging up, Tom stared at the worn photograph on his desk himself in full combat gear, arms slung around his best friend Jake Miller, both grinning beneath the Afghan sun, unaware that 2 weeks after the photo was taken, Jake would lose both legs to an IED that military dogs should have detected. The memory of that day still came to him in fragments, the flash of light, the concussive force, the dust-filled air, and the sounds. God, the sounds. The dog handler's frantic calls, the dogs barking. Too late. Far too late. Jake's screams. Tom rubbed his thigh above the prosthesis, feeling the familiar phantom pain intensify with the memory. The dog had failed them that day. The handler had been inexperienced. The dog distracted. A preventable tragedy. The after-action report had called it, as if that somehow made Jake's shattered body more acceptable. "Dogs are tools," Tom muttered to himself, echoing what he'd told Lily. "And tools break when you need them most." For Sargent, life with Lily had reawakened something long dormant purpose. Each morning, he performed a methodical inspection of her room, checking corners and closets before settling into his guard position. When she left for school, he monitored the house, alert to every sound, and when she returned, his entire being focused on her safety and well-being. But memories continued to surface, particularly after encountering Tom's scent. Fragments of missions, the weight of tactical gear, the heavy heat of Afghanistan, and Handler's 3 different voices, 3 different hands, all leading him toward danger rather than away from it. Most persistent was the memory of his final mission with Staff Sergeant Mason Rivera. The dusty road, the village approach, the subtle change in scent that Sargent had detected. He had alerted as trained, sitting rigidly, signaling the presence of explosives. But the radio call, the urgency of the situation, the command to continue despite his warning. Then the explosion that took Mason, left Sargent wounded, and began his long journey toward obsolescence. Sometimes at night, as Lily slept, Sargent found himself pacing the small bedroom, restless with half-remembered duties. On those nights, he would eventually settle beside Lily's bed, his chin resting on the mattress, watching over the small human who had saved him when no one else would. 3 weeks and 4 days after bringing Sargent home, Lily faced her first major crisis. Madison Campbell, still determined to make Lily's life difficult, knocked into her in the lunch line, sending Lily's chocolate milk carton splashing across her favorite shirt, the one with horses galloping across the front. "Oops," Madison said, not bothering to hide her smirk. "Sorry about that." Mr. Jenkins, monitoring the cafeteria that day, appeared with paper towels and a stern look for Madison. "Accidents happen, Miss Campbell. Perhaps more care next time." Lily fought back tears as she dabbed at the spreading stain. "It's ruined. Your mama can wash it," Mr. Jenkins assured her. "Stains come out." But Lily wasn't thinking about the shirt. She was thinking about Sargent. She'd planned to wear this shirt for 3 days her mother never noticed repeats if the clothing wasn't visibly dirty. Now she'd have to put it in the laundry, which meant wearing something else tomorrow. which meant disrupting the careful system she'd created to minimize extra laundry that might make her mother suspicious. By the time she boarded the bus that afternoon, Lily had developed a new plan. She would hand-wash the shirt in her bathroom sink, dry it with her hairdryer, and her mother would never know. But as the bus turned onto her street, Lily saw something that made her blood run cold. Her mother's car was in the driveway, hours before she normally returned home. "Mom's car is there," she whispered to herself, panic rising. "Why is Mom's car there?" As the bus slowed at her stop, Lily's phone chimed with a text message. With trembling fingers, she checked the screen. "Coming home early to clean. Thought I'd surprise you by organizing your room. Love you." Mom Lily bolted from the bus the moment the doors opened, her backpack bouncing against her spine as she ran full speed toward her house, a silent prayer repeating with each footfall. "Please, don't find him. Please don't find him. Please don't find him." Behind her, the bus driver watched with concern as the usually sedate girl sprinted away. So did Mr. Jenkins, who had followed the bus in his own vehicle after noticing Lily's distress at school. The old security guard's weathered face creased with worry as he watched Lily disappear through her front door. "Good luck, soldier," he murmured, both to Lily and to the dog he knew waited inside. Lily burst through the front door, breathless from her sprint. The house was quiet, too quiet. Her backpack slid from her shoulders, landing with a soft thud on the entryway floor as she listened intently for any sound of her mother. "Mom?" she called, trying to keep her voice casual despite the hammering of her heart. No answer came. Lily crept down the hallway toward her bedroom, each step measured, each breath shallow. The door to her room stood slightly ajar, a sliver of lavender wall visible through the gap. She pushed it open slowly, wincing at the faint creak of the hinges. Her room was empty. No mother. No sergeant. The dog bed she'd crafted from her old quilt remained in its place between the wall and her bed. But Sergeant himself was nowhere to be seen. Panic clawed at Lily's throat as she dropped to her knees, checking under the bed, then the closet, then behind her desk. "Sergeant," she whispered urgently. "Where are you, boy?" A muffled sound from another part of the house caught her attention. Lily froze, listening. It came again, her mother's voice, speaking softly from her father's bedroom. Confusion momentarily displaced panic. Why would her mother be in Dad's room since the divorce? Sarah never entered that space, treating it like sovereign territory in their shared custody arrangement. Lily tiptoed down the hallway, past the family photos that still featured all three of them together, toward the partially open door of her father's bedroom. As she drew closer, she could make out her mother's words. "Don't understand how this happened. Tom is going to—" The rest was lost as Lily's foot hit the squeaky floorboard outside the room, the one she usually remembered to avoid during her nighttime trips to the bathroom. The conversation inside halted abruptly. "Lily, is that you, honey?" her mother's voice called out. Before Lily could respond or retreat, the door swung open fully, revealing Sarah standing in the doorway. Her expression a complex mixture of confusion, worry, and something else. Was it fear? "Mom, Lily began, but the explanation died in her throat as she peered past her mother into the room beyond. Tom Thompson sat on the edge of his bed, his prosthetic leg removed for comfort as he often did at home. But it wasn't the sight of her father that stopped Lily's breath. It was the German shepherd sitting at perfect attention beside him, eyes fixed forward in the formal posture of a military working dog awaiting commands. "Sergeant," Lily whispered. At the sound of her voice, Sergeant's ears twitched, but he remained in position, his military training evidently triggered by something in this situation. "Your father came home early," Sarah explained, her voice carefully neutral. "His leg was bothering him from the weather change. He found your friend in your room." Tom's face was unreadable, a mask Lily recognized from the rare occasions when he spoke about Afghanistan. It was the expression he wore when containing emotions too powerful to release. "Lily," he said, his voice military crisp, "you want to explain why there's a military working dog living in your bedroom?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Lily felt tears welling in her eyes, but she straightened her back, squaring her small shoulders in unconscious mimicry of Sergeant's posture. "He was dying," she said simply. "Nobody wanted him. He followed me home. 3 weeks ago," Sarah added, looking pointedly at Lily. "Based on the amount of dog hair I found while cleaning." 3 weeks and 4 days, Lily corrected automatically, then bit her lip. Tom's gaze shifted between his daughter and the German shepherd, who remained rigidly at attention. "This dog has military training. He's not some stray mutt you can just take in." "He belongs to the army." "They threw him away." Lily's voice rose with emotion. "Mr. Jenkins said military dogs get abandoned all the time when they're too old or hurt. Sergeant was starving behind the school. He would have died if animal control got him." "Mr. Jenkins?" Sarah questioned. "The security guard?" Lily nodded miserably. "He recognized that Sergeant was a military dog. He's been helping me take care of him. He gave me dog food and medicine and a book about how to train military dogs." Tom's jaw tightened. "So you've been lying to us for almost a month, with the help of a school employee." "I wasn't lying," Lily protested weakly. "I just wasn't telling. That's called lying by omission." "Lily," Sarah said, though her tone lacked real anger. "And it's still lying." Tom shook his head, disappointment evident in the set of his shoulders. "This dog is dangerous. Lily, military working dogs aren't pets. They're trained to attack." "What were you thinking?" "He's not dangerous." Lily took a step forward, defensive heat rising in her cheeks. "He's gentle and smart and sad. He has nightmares just like you do. Dad, sometimes he gets scared of thunder because it sounds like the bombs in Afghanistan, but he never hurts anybody." Tom flinched at the comparison, and Lily immediately regretted her words. Sergeant, sensing the tension, shifted his weight slightly, eyes moving to track Tom's reaction. "Look at him," Tom said, gesturing toward the German shepherd. "The minute I found him, he went into combat mode. He's still in it now. This isn't a family pet. Lily, this is a weapon." "He's not a weapon," Lily whispered, tears now falling freely. "He's a hero, and heroes shouldn't die alone behind schools." Sarah moved to put an arm around Lily's shoulders, but the girl shrugged away, stepping closer to Sergeant instead. The dog's eyes tracked her movement, though he maintained his rigid posture. "Sergeant, Lily said, her voice trembling. "Come." For a moment, the German shepherd remained frozen, caught between contradicting loyalties. Then, with deliberate dignity, he rose and crossed to Lily's side, pressing his body against her leg in a protective stance. The simple act of disobeying military bearing to comfort a child seemed to startle Tom. He studied the dog with newfound attention, noting the graying muzzle, the scars visible beneath the coat, the intelligence in the amber eyes. "Where's his service number?" Tom asked, his voice softer now. "On his tags," Lily said, kneeling beside Sargent. "See? It says MWD, and then numbers." Tom leaned forward, squinting to read the worn metal tags. As he did so, something flickered in his expression. Recognition, followed by disbelief. 329871142, he read aloud, then looked up at Sargent's face with new intensity. "Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion." Sargent's ears pricked forward at the unit designation, his body subtly shifting to an even more alert posture. "You know him?" Sarah asked, confusion evident in her voice. Tom didn't respond immediately. Instead, he swung his residual limb over the edge of the bed, reaching for his prosthetic. With practiced movements, he secured it in place, then stood, balancing carefully. "Checkpoint," he said suddenly, the word clearly a command rather than a statement. Sargent immediately turned his body sideways, positioning himself for a tactical search pattern. "Cover," Tom said next. The German shepherd moved to Tom's right side, slightly behind him, in perfect position to protect a patrol's flank. Tom's face had drained of color. "It can't be," he whispered, more to himself than to the others. "That was 8 years ago." "What's happening?" Sarah asked, looking between man and dog. "Tom, do you know this dog?" Lily watched, wide-eyed, as her father sank back down onto the bed, his gaze never leaving Sargent. "Not directly," Tom finally answered, "but I know of him. Every man in my unit did." He drew a deep breath. "This is Sergeant B, from Rivera's K9 team. He was the dog that—" His voice faltered. "The dog that— What—" "Dad," Lily pressed when he didn't continue. Tom's eyes took on the distant quality they sometimes did when memories pulled him back to Afghanistan. "We were on patrol near Kandahar. Intelligence reported a high-value target in the area. Rivera's dog, this dog, alerted on the road, signaling explosives, but command pushed us to continue. Said the intel was too important." Sarah moved to sit beside Tom, her hand finding his in a gesture of support that transcended their divorce. "What happened? The IED took out our lead vehicle. Rivera and 2 others died instantly. Jake, my best friend, lost both legs." Tom's hand unconsciously moved to his own prosthetic. "I caught shrapnel, lost consciousness. When I came to, they told me the dog had been injured trying to pull Rivera clear of the blast." Lily knelt beside Sargent, her arms around his neck. "He was trying to save people." Tom nodded slowly. "That's what they told me later. That he kept returning to the burning vehicle despite his injuries, trying to drag survivors clear. But I never saw it. I was evac'd out with Jake." His voice roughened. "For years, I blamed the dog teams. Thought they'd missed the IED, that their failure cost us everything." "But Sargent didn't fail," Lily said firmly. "You just said he alerted. He warned you." "Yes," Tom admitted, the single word seeming to cost him considerable effort. "He did his job, We just didn't listen." He looked up at Sarah. "All this time, I've been blaming the wrong target." Sargent had relaxed his military bearing, sensing the shift in mood. He leaned against Lily's small frame, his graying muzzle resting on her shoulder as though offering comfort. The tableau held for a long moment father, mother, daughter, and dog frozen in a moment of revelation. Then a sharp knock at the front door shattered the stillness. Sarah rose. "I'll get it." Lily used the interruption to move closer to her father. Sargent still pressed against her side. "Does this mean he can stay?" she asked hopefully. Before Tom could answer, Sarah returned to the doorway, her expression troubled. A man in a crisp military uniform stood behind her, his posture ramrod straight, his face professionally impassive. "Captain Lewis, Military Working Dog Program." He introduced himself with a brief nod. "I understand you have one of our assets here." Lily's arms tightened around Sargent's neck. "No," she whispered. Tom rose to his feet, instinctively straightening his posture before the officer despite being out of the service for years. "Captain, what brings you here?" "Mr. Jenkins at Jefferson Elementary made some inquiries about a retired MWD matching this dog's description and service number. Those inquiries filtered up through channels." Captain Lewis's gaze moved to Sargent, who had returned to alert posture at the sight of a uniformed officer. "That's definitely one of ours. Sergeant B, Explosive Detection Specialist, 3 tours. Reported missing from the transition kennels at Fort Bragg 3 years ago." "Missing?" Tom questioned. "Or abandoned?" A flicker of discomfort crossed the captain's professional mask. "There was a paperwork error during unit deactivation. The dog should have been transferred to the adoption program." "But he wasn't," Lily said accusingly, tears streaming down her face. "He was left all alone." "These things happen, unfortunately," Captain Lewis said, his tone softening slightly at the sight of Lily's distress. "But I'm here to correct that mistake. Sergeant B will be transferred to our retirement facility at Fort Bragg, where he'll receive proper care." "He's receiving proper care here," Lily insisted. "I take care of him. He's happy now." Captain Lewis shook his head. "I understand your attachment, young lady, but this isn't a decision for civilians. Military working dogs remain government property even after their service concludes. There are protocols." "Property?" Lily's voice rose in disbelief. "He's not a thing. He's a hero." Tom placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Captain, is there any way to formalize a civilian adoption, given the circumstances?" "That would normally be possible," the officer acknowledged. "But this particular dog has a documented history of PTSD and combat stress reactions. That makes him ineligible for standard civilian adoption." "He's never hurt me," Lily protested. "Not once." "It's not about what he's done. It's about what might happen," Captain Lewis explained, not unkindly. "These dogs are trained as weapons first, companions second. In a stressful situation, training can override everything else." Tom's grip on Lily's shoulder tightened slightly. "When do you need to take him?" "Now, sir. I have orders and transportation ready." Lily's small frame began to shake with suppressed sobs. "No, please. He needs me. I promised I'd never leave him." Sarah moved to her daughter's side, wrapping an arm around her. "Surely There must be some accommodation possible. My daughter has clearly formed a bond with this animal." Captain Lewis remained impassive. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Regulations are clear." Tom studied Sargent, who had maintained perfect military bearing throughout the conversation, as though understanding that his fate was being decided. The German shepherd's eyes, however, kept returning to Lily, revealing an attachment beyond training. "Give us a moment to say goodbye," Tom finally said, his voice leaving no room for argument despite his civilian status. Captain Lewis nodded once. 5 minutes. I'll wait outside with the transport kennel." As the officer retreated, Lily collapsed against Sargent, burying her face in his fur. "I won't let them take you," she sobbed. I promised you'd never be alone again." Sarah knelt beside her daughter, tears in her own eyes. "Lily, sweetheart, sometimes promises get broken, even when we don't want them to. It's not fair. He saved people, and this is how they thank him, by putting him in another kennel." Tom watched the scene, his own emotions in turmoil. The dog he had blamed for years, the embodiment of his anger over Jake's injuries and his own, now stood before him, old, scarred, but still dignified, not a weapon that had failed, but a soldier who had done his duty despite impossible circumstances, a soldier who had then been discarded when no longer useful. The parallel to his own experience after discharge wasn't lost on Tom. How many times had he felt like military property, useful until damaged, then processed through an impersonal system? "We have to let him go, Lily," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "But I promise you this, it won't be the end." Lily looked up at her father, hope fighting through despair in her tear-streaked face. "What do you mean?" "I don't know yet," Tom admitted. "But I give you my word as a soldier this isn't over." Outside, Captain Lewis waited beside a military vehicle, a large transport kennel ready in the back. As the Thompson family emerged from the house, Sargent walking perfectly at heel beside Lily. The officer's expression softened marginally. "He looks well cared for," he observed. "You did a good job with him?" Lily said nothing, her hand buried in the fur at Sargent's neck. The German shepherd himself seemed to understand what was happening. He stood with military stillness, but his eyes never left Lily's face. "Time to go, Sergeant," Captain Lewis said, opening the kennel door. Lily knelt, wrapping her arms around the dog's neck one last time. "I love you," she whispered into his ear. "I'll find you again. I promise." As Sargent was led to the vehicle, he looked back once, a breach of his training that spoke volumes about his attachment. His eyes met Lily's across the growing distance between them, conveying what seemed impossible for an animal, yet undeniable to anyone watching, a mixture of gratitude, loyalty, and something profoundly like love. The kennel door closed with a metallic finality. Captain Lewis saluted Tom, a gesture of respect from one serviceman to another, before driving away with Sargent in the back of the vehicle. Lily stood between her parents, watching until the car disappeared around the corner. Then, and only then, did she allow the full force of her grief to emerge, collapsing into her father's arms with heart-wrenching sobs. "I promised him," she kept repeating. I promised he'd never be alone again." Tom held his daughter tightly, his own throat constricted with emotion. Over Lily's head, his eyes met Sarah's, a silent communication passing between them, the shared pain of watching their child's heart break, and the shared determination to somehow make it right. "We'll figure something out," Sarah said quietly, placing a hand on Lily's trembling back. "Your father gave his word." In the military vehicle driving toward Fort Bragg, Sargent sat perfectly still in his transport kennel, the training of years maintaining his composure despite the separation from the small human who had saved him. But as the Thompson home disappeared from view, the old warrior did something he had never done in all his years of service. A single, solitary tear slid from his amber eye, dropping unnoticed onto the metal floor of the kennel. The retirement facility for military working dogs at Fort Bragg resembled a prison more than a sanctuary. Concrete runs, chain-link fencing, and the persistent smell of disinfectant greeted Sargent as handlers transferred him from the transport kennel to his assigned space. The facility was clean and professionally run, the staff competent and not unkind. But the stark contrast to Lily's lavender bedroom with its soft quilt and whispered bedtime stories could not have been more pronounced. For 3 days, Sargent refused food. He accepted water, military discipline too deeply ingrained to allow complete self-destruction, but the kibble in the metal bowl remained untouched. He lay on the thin pad provided, eyes fixed on the kennel door, body at attention even in rest. The facility veterinarian noted his deteriorating condition with concern, marking his chart with observations about adjustment difficulties and possible depression. "Not unusual with the older MWDs," Dr. Patterson explained to her assistant as they made evening rounds, "especially ones with significant field service. They've seen too much, lost too many handlers. Some of them just give up." Her assistant peered through the chain link at Sargent's motionless form. This one came from a family placement, unauthorized civilian possession. "Dr. Patterson corrected. "Though the paperwork's a mess, apparently. The dog was reported missing 3 years ago during a unit deactivation. Somehow ended up with a child who had been hiding him in her bedroom." She shook her head. "Military working dogs aren't pets. People don't understand the training, the triggers these animals have. Still, Doc, look at him. He was probably happier there." Dr. Patterson made another notation on the chart. "Happiness isn't the metric we use. Turner, safety is, for the dog and the civilians." In Ridgewood, the Thompson household had descended into a heavy silence. Lily moved through her days mechanically, going to school, coming home, picking at her meals. The vibrant, secretive energy that had animated her during Sargent's stay had vanished, replaced by a quiet resignation that worried both her parents. "She's not sleeping," Sarah reported to Tom during a tense conversation in the kitchen. 3 days after Sargent's removal. "I hear her crying at night." Tom massaged his thigh above the prosthesis, a habit that intensified with stress. "What do you want me to do?" "Sarah, the dog belongs to the military. That's the problem, isn't it, treating living creatures like equipment?" Sarah's voice sharpened. "I thought you were going to figure something out." "That's what you promised Lily." "I'm trying," Tom snapped, then immediately softened his tone. "I've made calls. my old CO, Jake's doctor at Walter Reed. Even reached out to a buddy who works with veteran service dogs. But the regulations are clear: dogs with documented PTSD and combat experience don't go to civilians, especially not homes with children. So that's it. We just let our daughter's heart stay broken. Sarah leaned against the counter, suddenly looking exhausted. You know, when Lily first moved in with that dog, I thought it was, I don't know, a phase, a child getting attached to a stray. But it was more than that. Wasn't it? Tom nodded slowly. You didn't see them together the way I did. When Captain Lewis was here, the way that dog looked at Lily, it wasn't training. It was... He struggled to find the appropriate word. Connection. Then fight for them, Sarah said simply. You're a Thompson. Being stubborn is practically genetic. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. His phantom limb pain, always worse under emotional stress, kept him shifting restlessly. Around 3 a.m., he gave up, swinging his legs over the edge of the bed and reattaching his prosthesis with practiced movements. He made his way to the kitchen, intending to make coffee, but paused outside Lily's door. Soft sobbing came from inside. Tom hesitated, then gently knocked. Lily, can I come in? No answer came, but the crying paused. Tom pushed the door open slowly. Lily sat on her bed, clutching Sergeant's worn leash, a gift from Mr. Jenkins that the military hadn't bothered to take. In the dim glow of her nightlight, her tear-streaked face looked younger and more vulnerable than her 8 years. I miss him, Daddy, she whispered. Do you think he misses me too? Tom crossed to the bed and sat beside her, the mattress dipping under his weight. I know he does. Lily pat. How do you know? Tom considered his answer carefully. Because soldiers recognize their own, and that dog... Sergeant, he recognized something in you, something worth fighting for. Lily leaned against her father's side. He saved people, didn't he? In Afghanistan? Yes, Tom admitted, including people I cared about. I was wrong about him. Lily. For years, I blamed military dogs for what happened to my unit, to Jake, to me. But it wasn't their fault. It was war. Just war. Is that why you didn't want dogs, because you blamed them? Tom wrapped an arm around his daughter's small shoulders. Partly. And partly because... He paused, searching for words simple enough for a child, yet true enough for the complexity of his feelings. When you lose things, people, parts of yourself, you get scared of loving anything new. Scared it'll be taken away too. Lily looked up at him, wisdom beyond her years in her gaze. But if you never love anything, isn't that worse? Something broke open in Tom's chest, a hard shell he'd carried since Afghanistan, cracking under the simple truth from his daughter's lips. Yeah, he managed, his voice rough. Yeah, it is. Me. They sat in silence for a moment, father and daughter united in shared grief. Then Tom straightened, decision crystallizing. Get dressed, he said suddenly. Lily blinked in confusion. What? It's the middle of the night. Best time for a mission, Tom replied, already standing. Grab a jacket. We're going for a drive. Where? Fort Bragg. To see a dog about a girl. The pre-dawn drive to Fort Bragg took just under an hour, the roads empty and the gray liminal space between night and morning. Tom drove with the focused intensity he'd once applied to combat operations, occasionally glancing at Lily, who sat quietly in the passenger seat, Sergeant's leash clutched in her small hands. "Dad," she asked as they passed the Fort Bragg welcome sign, "are we breaking rules?" Tom's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "No, we're just pursuing alternative options." Is that soldier speak for breaking rules? Despite the tension knotting his shoulders, Tom felt a smile tug at his lips. "You're too smart for your own good." Lily pad. He navigated the sprawling military installation with the ease of familiarity, eventually pulling into the parking lot of a low utilitarian building marked MWD Training and Retirement Facility. A single light burned in the office section, though the kennel area remained dark. "Wait here," Tom instructed, cutting the engine. "But Dad, military protocol. Lily, let me establish contact first." Inside the facility's front office, a sleepy-looking young corporal jerked to attention when Tom entered. "Sir, can I help you?" The "sir" was automatic, a response to Tom's bearing rather than any visible rank. "Thomas Thompson." Tom introduced himself. "I'm here about MWD Sergeant B, brought in 3 days ago." The corporal frowned, checking his computer. "I don't show any authorized visits scheduled, sir." "It's not on the schedule," Tom agreed. "Call Dr. Patterson. Tell her it's about the dog refusing food." "At 4:30 in the morning, sir." Tom fixed the young man with the same stare he'd once used on new recruits. "Unless you want to explain to your CO why a decorated MWD died of self-starvation on your watch, I suggest you make the call." 20 minutes later, Dr. Patterson arrived, lab coat thrown over civilian clothes, her expression caught between annoyance and professional concern. "Mr. Thompson," she greeted him curtly, "Corporal Davis says you have information about Sergeant B's condition." "Not information," Tom corrected. "A solution." Dr. Patterson folded her arms across her chest, skepticism evident in every line of her posture. "Mr. Thompson, with all due respect, I've been treating military working dogs for 15 years. If Sergeant B is refusing food, it's a common adjustment reaction. We have protocols." "And how well are those protocols working?" Tom challenged, maintaining the direct eye contact that had served him well through military confrontations. 3 days, no food intake, I'm guessing minimal water, deteriorating vital signs. A flicker of surprise crossed the veterinarian's face before she masked it with professional detachment. "Our records are confidential. Mr. Thompson, I'm not at liberty to discuss—" "I was 3rd Ranger Battalion, Afghanistan." Tom interrupted, his voice dropping. "I was there the day Sergeant B's handler, Staff Sergeant Rivera, died. The day this dog tried to drag survivors from burning vehicles despite his own injuries." He leaned forward slightly. "So let's skip the bureaucratic dance and talk about what matters keeping a decorated war dog alive." Dr. Patterson studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Follow me." She led Tom through secure doors into the kennel area, the overhead lights flickering on at their entrance. The facility housed perhaps 20 dogs, most sleeping despite the disturbance. As they passed the runs, Tom noted the military precision of the setup: clean, efficient, utterly institutional. "Sergeant B is here," Dr. Patterson said, stopping before a kennel near the end of the row. The German shepherd lay on a thin mat in the corner, his position not one of relaxation, but of a soldier at watchful rest, at their approach. His head lifted slightly, eyes assessing before returning to their 1,000-yard stare. The food bowl sat untouched, water barely disturbed. "Christ," Tom muttered, taking in the dog's condition. In just 3 days, Sargent seemed to have lost what little reserve he'd built up during his time with Lily. His coat had dulled again, eyes sunken, the visible ribs more pronounced. "As you can see," Dr. Patterson said quietly, "he's deteriorating rapidly. We've tried different foods, hand feeding, even mild sedatives to reduce stress. Nothing's working." Her professional mask slipped slightly. "Some of them just give up, especially the older ones with multiple handlers and combat trauma." Tom knelt before the kennel, studying the German shepherd intently. Sargent acknowledged his presence with the barest flick of an ear, but otherwise remained motionless. "He's not giving up," Tom said finally. "He's mourning." Dr. Patterson raised an eyebrow. "Dogs don't mourn, Mr. Thompson. They form attachments, certainly. But, with all due respect, Doctor, that's bullshit." Tom straightened, meeting her gaze. "This dog found my daughter after years on the streets. He protected her, comforted her during nightmares, hid when instructed, and maintained perfect military bearing when discovered. That's not just training, that's choice. Even if I agreed with your assessment," Dr. Patterson replied, though her tone had softened, "it doesn't change military regulations. MWDs with combat experience and PTSD symptoms aren't eligible for civilian adoption, especially to households with children." Tom took a deep breath, playing his final card. "I've been on the phone for 3 days, called in every favor from Baghdad to D.C. This morning, I got this." He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. "Special exemption authorization, signed by Colonel Mercer, head of the MWD program at the Pentagon." Dr. Patterson accepted the document with visible surprise, scanning its contents. "This is highly irregular. A therapeutic placement trial under veteran supervision." She looked up. "I wasn't aware such a classification existed." "It didn't until about 6 hours ago," Tom admitted. "Colonel Mercer served with me in Afghanistan. He owes me. And more importantly, he believes in doing right by the dogs who served. This still requires my medical sign-off," Dr. Patterson noted, tapping the relevant section of the document. "Which is why I'm here at 4:30 in the morning instead of just showing up with these papers during regular business hours." Tom gestured toward Sargent. "Look at him, Doctor. Really look. What's your professional assessment of his chances if he stays here?" Dr. Patterson sighed, turning her gaze to the listless German shepherd. "Poor to guarded," she admitted reluctantly. "If the food refusal continues, we'd be looking at forced feeding within 48 hours. And what about his quality of life? We don't generally use that metric for military equipment," Tom finished. "But we both know these dogs are more than that." Dr. Patterson fell silent, her eyes on Sargent. After a long moment, she spoke again, her voice softer. "There was a dog in Fallujah, my first deployment as a military vet, Belgian Malinois named Rex. best explosives detection dog in the unit. When his handler was killed, Rex stopped working, wouldn't respond to commands, wouldn't eat. By the book. He should have been euthanized as unfit for service. She paused, remembering. Instead, our commanding officer broke about 15 regulations and sent Rex home with the handler's brother, another Marine. 6 months later, I got photos of Rex, healthy again, working as an unofficial therapy dog at the VA. She met Tom's gaze. Sometimes the book is wrong, Mr. Thompson. So, you'll sign? Instead of answering directly, Dr. Patterson moved to the kennel door, unlocking it with practiced efficiency. Let's see if my patient has any interest in your proposed treatment plan. The kennel door swung open. Sargent remained motionless, eyes fixed forward, the perfect military bearing of a dog waiting for authorized personnel. Tom stepped back, turning toward the facility entrance. Lily, he called, voice echoing slightly in the concrete space. Come here, please. Small footsteps approached rapidly. Then Lily appeared, sleep-tousled and wide-eyed, Sargent's leash still clutched in her hand. She froze when she saw the German shepherd in the open kennel. Sargent, she whispered, her voice trembling. The transformation was immediate and profound. Sargent's head snapped up, ears forward, eyes suddenly alert. He rose in a single fluid motion, his entire body quivering with recognition. Go ahead, Dr. Patterson said softly to Lily. Call him to you. Sargent, come, Lily commanded, her small voice suddenly strong with certainty. The German shepherd bolted from the kennel, covering the distance to Lily in 3 powerful strides before skidding to a halt directly before her for a heartbeat. He maintained perfect military posture, as though awaiting inspection. Then, with a small whine that seemed to contain years of stored emotion, he pressed his graying muzzle against her chest. Lily's arms wrapped around his neck, her face buried in his fur. I told you I'd find you, she whispered. I promised. Remember. Dr. Patterson watched the reunion with professional interest that gradually softened into something more personal. I've never seen anything quite like that, she admitted. The change is remarkable. Tom stood beside her, his own throat tight with emotion. That's what I've been trying to tell you. This isn't just any placement. It's the right placement. As if to underscore his point, Sargent did something that made even the experienced veterinarian blink in surprise. The German shepherd, still pressed against Lily, turned his head toward the untouched food bowl in his kennel, then back to the child, then to Tom, a clear communication of intent. He's hungry, Lily announced, as though this were the most natural development in the world. He'll eat now. Won't you, Sargent? To prove her right, the dog padded back to his kennel, looked at the assembled humans as if to ensure they were watching, then methodically consumed every piece of kibble in the bowl. Dr. Patterson shook her head in amazement. Well, Mr. Thompson, it seems your therapeutic placement trial has my medical endorsement. She took a pen from her lab coat pocket and signed the authorization with a flourish. You'll need to bring him in for weekly evaluations. And there are protocols to follow regarding public exposure, potential triggers. We'll follow every rule, Tom promised. To the letter. See that you do. Dr. Patterson's professional demeanor returned, though her eyes remained softer as she watched Lily and Sargent. That dog has served his country with distinction. He deserves a retirement with dignity. He'll have more than that, Tom said quietly. He'll have a home. As they prepared to leave, Sargent walking perfectly at Lily's heel with renewed energy in his step. Dr. Patterson pulled Tom aside for one final word. "You know," she said, voice pitched for his ears alone. "In all my years working with these dogs, I've seen many endings. Most of them aren't happy. The ones too damaged for service, too dangerous for adoption." She left the implication hanging. What you did here today, calling in favors, creating this therapeutic placement classification, it might just change how we handle these cases going forward. Tom nodded, understanding the significance. Sometimes it takes one case to change the system. And sometimes, Dr. Patterson added, watching as Lily clipped the leash to Sargent's collar with solemn ceremony, it takes one little girl to remind us all that these aren't just working dogs. They're heroes who deserve to come home. The sun crested the horizon as the Thompson family car pulled into their driveway, casting long golden shadows across the modest lawn. Sarah stood on the front porch in her bathrobe, arms wrapped tightly around herself against the early morning chill. Her expression cycled rapidly through confusion, relief, and finally astonishment as she registered not just her ex-husband and daughter returning from their mysterious pre-dawn expedition, but the German shepherd who emerged from the back seat with military precision. "Tom!" she called, descending the porch steps. "What on earth? We brought him home. Mom!" Lily's voice rang with joy as she bounded from the car, Sargent following at a perfect heel. "Dad fixed everything Sargent gets to stay with us forever." Sarah's questioning gaze met Tom's over their daughter's head. He offered a tired smile and a small nod, confirming the seemingly impossible news. "It's complicated," he said, "but legal." A special placement program for veteran handlers and military working dogs, weekly check-ins at Fort Bragg, some paperwork, but... He gestured to the German shepherd, standing attentively beside Lily. "He's home." The impromptu celebration that followed pancakes at 6 a.m., Lily chattering non-stop about Sargent's new life with them. The German shepherd, accepting small bites of pancake with dignified appreciation, held a warmth the Thompson household hadn't experienced since before the divorce. Sarah and Tom moved around each other in the kitchen with remembered ease, the awkwardness of their separation temporarily suspended in the glow of their daughter's restored happiness. "You did good, Tom," Sarah said quietly as they washed dishes side by side, watching through the window as Lily showed Sargent the backyard with elaborate ceremony. "I didn't think you'd actually pull it off." "Neither did I," he admitted. "Took calling in every favor I had left, creating a whole new classification in the military working dog program." He paused, hands stilling in the soapy water. "But seeing them together, it was worth it." "Yes," Sarah agreed softly. "It was?" Word spread quickly through the small military community of Ridgewood. Mr. Jenkins arrived that afternoon bearing proper dog supplies, a memory foam bed, stainless steel food bowls, a new leash and collar embroidered with SJEET, B. U.S. Army Ret, in gold thread. Figured he deserved his rank displayed properly. The old security guard explained, watching with satisfaction as Sargent investigated his new bed. circling 3 times before settling onto it with a contented sigh. A week later, Jefferson Elementary held a small ceremony in the gymnasium, ostensibly an assembly on service animals, but in reality, a celebration of Sargent's official retirement. The entire school gathered as Principal Watkins presented a special certificate, and Mr. Jenkins, resplendent in his old dress uniform, complete with Vietnam service medals, stood at attention while delivering a brief history of military working dogs. These animals have served alongside American troops in every conflict since World War I, he told the rapt students. They've saved countless lives, detected thousands of explosive devices, and demonstrated the kind of loyalty and courage we should all aspire to. Even Madison Campbell, Lily's former tormentor, seemed impressed as Sargent demonstrated basic commands, his training still impeccable despite his age and injuries. "Can I pet him?" she asked Lily afterward, the question an olive branch between them. "You have to ask him properly," Lily instructed. Suddenly the expert, "Hold out your hand slowly and let him sniff you first." The household adapted to their new member with surprising ease. Sarah overcame her initial reservations about having a dangerous military dog in the house after witnessing Sargent's gentle interactions with Lily. Tom converted part of the garage into a comfortable space where Sargent could retreat when household activities became too stimulating. Though the German Shepherd increasingly chose to remain wherever Lily was, most remarkable was the change in Tom himself. The weekly trips to Fort Bragg for Sargent's checkups evolved into regular volunteer work with the Military Working Dog Program. He began sharing his experiences with other veterans, developing a program that paired retired military dogs with former handlers suffering from PTSD. "They understand each other," he explained to Sarah one evening, watching as Lily read aloud to Sargent from her favorite book. "The dogs know what the vets have been through, and vice versa. No explanations needed." The night terrors that had plagued Tom since Afghanistan didn't disappear entirely, but they changed. One particularly bad episode found him sitting bolt upright in bed, sweat-soaked and disoriented, the phantom pain in his missing leg excruciating. Before he could fully register his surroundings, his bedroom door nudged open, and Sargent padded silently to his bedside, resting his graying muzzle on the mattress. Their eyes met in the darkness, 2 old soldiers who had seen too much, lost too much. Without command or invitation, Sargent hopped onto the bed, settling his substantial weight against Tom's side, a living anchor to the present moment. "How did you know?" Tom whispered, his hand finding the dog's fur. Sargent offered no explanation, of course, but the steady rhythm of his breathing gradually synchronized with Tom's, calming the human's racing heart. When Lily found them the next morning, still asleep side by side, she didn't wake them. She didn't. Instead, she carefully closed the door and went to find her mother. "Sargent's helping Dad with his bad dreams," she reported matter-of-factly. Sarah smiled, unsurprised. "That's what heroes do, honey. They help each other." 6 months after Sargent's homecoming, the Thompson family gathered in the backyard for a small barbecue. Jake Miller, Tom's friend who had lost both legs in the same explosion that took Tom's, visited from the VA Rehabilitation Center, his wheelchair navigating the carefully constructed ramps Tom had installed. "Never thought I'd be thanking a dog," Jake admitted, watching Sargent patrolling the perimeter of the yard with habitual vigilance. "Especially not after what happened." "He tried to warn us," Tom reminded him. And afterward, he tried to save us, just doing his job. Like we all were, Jake agreed, as if sensing the conversation concerned him. Sargent approached, sitting at perfect attention before the two veterans. Jake reached out a tentative hand, which the German shepherd permitted to rest briefly on his head. "Thanks, soldier," Jake said quietly. "Better late than never." "Huh." As evening fell, the family settled on the porch swing, Tom, Sarah, and Lily, with Sargent stretched across their feet. The German shepherd, once ready to surrender his life behind Jefferson Elementary, now dozed peacefully, occasionally opening one eye to verify his family's continued safety before returning to his well-earned rest. "You know what, Dad," Lily said, her small hand buried in Sargent's fur. "I think sometimes the ones who are most broken just need someone to believe they can be fixed." Tom's arm tightened around his daughter's shoulders, his other hand finding Sarah's in a gesture that bridged their complicated past. "I think you're right, Lilypad. Sometimes that's all any of us need." Sargent, hearing his name murmured in the conversation above him, thumped his tail once against the porch boards, a quiet affirmation from a warrior who had found, at long last, the peace he had earned. When we welcome a broken soul into our lives, we're often the ones who end up being saved. Sargent's story reminds us that even our most decorated heroes, whether on 4 legs or 2, can be discarded when they're no longer considered useful. How many of us have felt that same sting of obsolescence as we've aged, as our children have grown, as our careers have ended? Like Sargent, we all long for purpose, for someone who sees our true worth beyond our scars and gray muzzles. This German shepherd, who had given everything for his country only to be abandoned, found redemption not through medals or ceremony, but through the unconditional love of a child who refused to see him as damaged goods. And in that simple connection, healing flowed both ways. Ode